welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. This is a piece of work that we have been looking at for over 2 years. So it started really for us looking at girls in puberty. It was a small piece of work, just understanding about what was happening with girls as they go through that life stage. And that really raised the question for us about how complex and what's going on in girls' lives at this time. And this prompted a much larger piece of work where we've gone out and, as Ruth said, we've put the girls really at the centre of this. So not only have we looked at what's happening within their sporting environment and their activity in their lives, but we've looked at their lives and to look at what's their motivations, what actually makes them tick, and how can we tap into that, because we don't want to fail a whole generation of girls with sport. So this morning what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend about 30 minutes taking you through some of the key findings of the research, and then we have a panel discussion, and we've got a great panel who can come at this from some really different perspectives, and I'll allow John to introduce the panel later on. And then there'll be some opportunity for questions, because I think the most important thing for me is that we have a conversation about this, that we all join in this conversation with all of our different perspectives. So first of all, let's just have a look at the problem itself. Ruth's talked about this before. Teenage girls are less active than teenage boys, and we see this massive drop-off, not just in terms of the activity they're doing, but also in terms of how they feel about sport. And that's a really important thing to remember. This is not just about behaviour, this is also about how it's making them feel. So by the time girls get to their early teens, only 10% of girls are actually meeting the recommended 60 minutes activity levels per day, which is so small and significantly smaller than for boys. So we want to change that. We want to see what we can do to actually inspire girls in this age group. And what we did first of all is we just had a look at the broader picture, and I found some quite worrying statistics about girls' broader lives. And it feels to me like there really is something out of kilter with girls' lives at the moment, which sport and exercise can really help support. So I just want to share with you a few things. So first of all, we talk about health. We know that there is a health crisis. 44% of girls in that young teenage years are overweight. We also have found a statistic from Girl Guiding, and I found this quite shocking actually. What's happening to happiness levels with girls? So 18% of girls are very happy in 2018. It was 38% of girls in 2011. What's happened that 20 percentage points have dropped? What's happening with this happiness? Mental health. So again, we're seeing quite a rise in the number of cases of mental health with young girls. So again, by 14, almost 1 in 4 girls have reported high levels of depressive symptoms. And that's compared to 1 in 10 boys. So again, it just again shouts out for me that there's something that's not quite working here. The final one is really about body image. And I know we have Dove here today who have really looked at this area with young girls. But again, from the Girl Guiding survey, 44% of girls were saying that they were unhappy with the way that they look. And that's really sad. That's really sad that young girls of that age feel unhappy about this. So when I think about we want to get more girls involved in organised sport, it's not just about for the sake of getting them involved, but it can have such a big impact on their lives, and that's what we're really here to do. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about this sort of sporty, non-sporty badge that seems to happen around this time. And it's really interesting because you'll hear one of the girls, we're going to listen to some of the girls speaking, and one of them actually says, I'm not sporty and I can't do any sport. And this is a girl who's about 13. So you start to wonder, this very binary way of describing themselves as sporty or not sporty is a massive barrier for girls. Now, between the ages of 11 and 16, there's around about 2.1 million girls. This is a massive number. So by my calculation, there's over 1 million girls who are not sporty and are already ruling themselves out through life to take part in sport and physical activity. And I'm just wondering, what's the message that we're giving these girls? And these are the girls that we've really focused on in the research that we've done. So we've been talking to girls who've either dropped out of sport or who have not engaged in sport. And it's been quite a tough crowd, actually, to be honest with you. But I think, again, we do tend as a sector to be able to cater better for the sporty girls because we know what that's about. We understand that that's about competitiveness and enjoyment, but we haven't really done enough about this group of non-sporty girls. So, to come on now to have a look at the research, what we decided to do, just to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the work that we did, that if we want to keep girls and develop truly innovative and exciting ways to keep girls engaged in sport, we need to start by wearing the girls' glasses. And this is actually a picture that one of the girls posted on our online community. So the way that we've got in touch with girls, we have been connecting with around just over 30 girls. They've been on an online community for us and they've been doing ethnographic work, talking about what happens in their lives, what's important to them, and what motivates them on an everyday basis. We've also had conversations with them about sport specifically, and we'll come on to listen to that in a moment. And then we got the girls back together and helped them think about some co-creation. So, the things that I'm going to talk about first of all, what's wrong, the attitudes and barriers towards sport. We're going to listen to some girls talk about that. We're going to talk about what's important in their lives, because there seems to be this relevance gap between what they're saying about sport and what's really important to them. And then what we've developed at the end is really how can we close that gap? How can we look particularly at this group of girls who are not sporty? And we've developed 8 key principles to have a look at really interrogating and questioning what are we doing and how could we do things differently? And perhaps this is the time when we want to do things very differently. Because we want to put the girls at the centre of designing the ideas for themselves. But I think one of the problems we've had in the past is if girls don't know what's out there, it's quite hard to imagine and design in a very creative way. It's a little bit like I was talking to somebody about when you want to know what you do when you grow up and everyone says, what job do you want to do? And you think teacher, nurse, doctor, lawyer. You don't know the hundreds and thousands of jobs that are out there. And I feel that this is the same for the girls. That, we talk to them about whether they're sporty or not sporty. They haven't even started to think about what's out there. So before we listen to the girls, there's just 4 things that I wanted to talk to you about. So the first thing is, just as I've said, it's a very narrow experience for some girls. So we've got them saying I'm sporty or not sporty, and for just under a third of girls, that's based just on school PE. Now that's quite a narrow band of sport that they've been exposed to. And then we see that only about 23% of girls are saying that they actually enjoy PE. So there's something going on there that's not really working. We feel that there is this relevance gap. It does seem to lack relevance for girls. And again, we need it to be important to them. We need it to be exciting for them as well. So what can we do in this space to have a look at? We also know it's so complex at this time. One thing that came through to me really clearly was that there's lots of things going on in girls' lives. And we know that round about puberty for girls, when girls are growing into their adult body, there is really low confidence levels. And that low confidence can be a massive inhibitor to a number of things. But sport is a stage that really makes them feel vulnerable. So we have to think about how we can support girls during this time. And then puberty specifically, 42% of girls were telling us that they avoided exercise when they had their periods. And we actually were talking to one mum who said, I let my daughter have the day off when she starts her period. There's something not quite going right here. We need to be able to help support girls more through that stage so that they don't get put off. And we saw some research from P&G that said by 16 and 17, 64% of girls will have quit sport. And I think that's a critical age because that's when sport doesn't happen in school anymore. So how are we going to get girls to transfer from something that they're doing in school to something that they're going to take with them through life and gain the rewards as they go through? So I'd like you to listen to this film of some girls telling us about sport.
One of the main reasons why girls my age start to drop out of sports is very much to do with their self-esteem. Being in a sporting team or just doing sporting really involves your body, and that's what you're really vulnerable about, particularly at my age. Like you don't want to put it out there and you don't want to use it.
Going that it's hard being a girl, especially with the clothes you have to wear sometimes, like leotards, not good with like body image and stuff, or changing in the changing rooms sometimes is a bit of a hassle, especially if the changing room is jam-packed. I think some people don't like that. I think they just need to be a bit more sensitive, and that some girls maybe are mean about it.
I mean, for me, it was because I like sport to a certain degree. I like it if I know that I'm not going to be judged for not being good, because I'm not good at sport. I'm not good at any sport. I'll go swimming with my mum on an evening, but again, that's with my mum, who's not going to judge me for being too slow or not doing the right arm stroke or whatever.
I think that girls my age start dropping out of sport because at school there's a lot of pressure on work and achieving and homework, and I think it just becomes tiring. And when you start school or when you're in school, it's more you have to like socialize with people, and it's about getting in with making new friends and stuff. And it's a bit harder sometimes if you're busy after school for hours doing sport.
Not everyone is such a big fan of sport. Not everyone wants to take it so seriously. I think that's a big thing that they've forgotten in sport. For some people, it's just a way to stay in shape, or it's just a way to have fun. And I think that's what I hated about sport at school. It was just something that took up an hour of my day that I didn't enjoy, because it was always so competitive and you always had to do really well and they would be grading you. And, I just wanted to have a good time throwing a ball around and playing, netball.
And what's changed?
There are pressures from social media and expectations that you have to live up to, or otherwise you're deemed like not smart enough or not pretty enough or not feminine enough. I think it's stupid, actually. It's really stupid.
Okay, so that was just a snapshot of some of the girls. And I think the thing that really struck me listening to these girls is it's about how sport makes them feel. And if sport makes them feel like that, why are they going to do it? We've really got to change and break down these barriers for girls. And I think, at the moment, the behaviour that we're trying to change from it, these girls, it's only if I have to. They're mandated to do sport. They're mandated to do it at school. And we heard a lot there about judgment, not just judgment from teaching staff, this is from other girls. They feel judged, and it's at a time when their bodies are developing and growing, and they don't want to feel judged. That girl was saying, I don't want to be in sport and have everybody looking at me, and it's a way of being exposed. They see it as time wasting. That's no good. That's not going to make them want to do it. There's a lot of rules in sport, and there's a lot of rules in school, and sometimes sport needs to break out from those rules. It's sometimes for girls a way to fail. They feel they've got no choice, and it's actually stressful to do sport. So I think if we wanted to think, what do we want sport to be? We actually want it to be chosen as time well spent. And we know that when we talk to people who really get something from sport in their lives, it's much more in this vein than it is in this vein. It's a stress buster. We see it as sociability. It's enjoyment. It's their choice. It's about feeling good. It's about feeling proud of what you're doing. It's about freedom, and it's about time out. So I think that's the movement that we want to create. Choose it as time well spent. And what do we need to do to actually help girls see that? I think the other thing that we found out that I think is really important to have a think about is that whole spectrum of disengagement that we see. Because I often hear us talk about teenage girls as one group. It isn't one group. just like any other group in society, there are lots of different motivations and needs. And I think at the far end, you've got sporty girls, and I think we've got this right, really, within the sector. There's a lot of brilliant things going on which really play to what those girls are looking for in their lives. At the other end of the spectrum, what we found is we had girls that Ruth talked about who'd really disengaged with sport much, much younger. And by the time puberty set in and all of the added problems that came along, we really felt we'd got to these girls too late. And as I say, it was quite a hard gig sitting talking to some of these girls and actually getting them to engage with the topic. But for me, the middle group is the really interesting one, and the one where I think we're missing the biggest opportunity. We talked to a lot of girls who talked about being sporty, but not anymore. And I'm just wondering, are we giving the right message to these girls? Because they're dropping out of sport and activity when actually they needn't. And it feels like these are the ones, again, that we just need to give a little bit of a nudge to. So when we come on to think about some of the solutions, I think we've got a bit of an open door with these girls in order to move them forward. So the barriers we saw for sport, I think the big thing about these is they are multi-layered, they are complex, there is not one solution. And I think in order to look at the barriers, we need to consider there are personal barriers about how girls feel about themselves, and that's a responsibility of everybody to make girls feel better about themselves. There are social barriers around how girls interact with others, and if sport is not part of that whole environment, it's very hard to get people to do things that are not with their groups of friends. And there are contextual barriers, so things that are happening if they're only experiencing sport in school, if they haven't got those opportunities to do things, if they don't feel included as part of that sporting fraternity, how do we get that to work better for them? So that talks about the barriers, and I think, we do need to think about how we minimise those barriers. But then I think the second thing we need to do is really think about what is it that we need to do to inspire girls and really excite them about sport. And this is where we need to think about their lives. So I'm just going to talk to you about 5 different anchors that we saw were really important foundations for girls' lives. So the first one here is the support network. And I think we recognise that girls need their friends, and we've recognised that in sport for a long time. But there's something here that we found that was really interesting, and this is how important families and particularly mothers were to girls at this age. And I think we underestimate that. This has been a trend, we've seen it in a number of data sets about mums becoming more important, and that interaction between mums and daughters actually having a very positive virtuous circle of mums being able to support girls and girls being able to support mums. And we heard one of the girls say, actually, I'm not sporty, I don't want to be judged, I go out with my mum and do it. So there's actually a mutual support network there that's really important. And I think as sport, I would question, what can we do more in that space? What can we do to really think about broader than just their friendship groups? The second one, really important, the foundation of girls' lives, to be socially connected. And actually that social connection and social media connection is their validation. It's really important about who they are. But I think the second thing about it is it takes up so much time as well. So it's actually taking up a lot of time in their lives. And I think there's 2 observations there that we thought were quite interesting. One was that actually we found girls had more than one Instagram account. They had a carefully curated Instagram account, which was for their wider group of friends, and actually spent a lot of time making sure that the right number of likes and that things were happening within that account to give the right impression. But they also had a private account which was for more close friends. And that was quite interesting to us, that there needs to be almost this brand of a person that girls were trying to project. The second thing within the socially connected that I think is really important is we saw some things that we say girls don't want. Competitiveness, commitment, things and behaviours that we would love to have within that sporting arena that are happening within that social media remit. Can we learn from that? Are there parallels that we can say, why are they so committed? What can we do within our sector to make us tap into some of those behaviours? The third thing to remember is actually that experiences and independence are really important at this stage in their lives. this is when they're making formative memories. And in fact, I was at a party on Saturday and somebody was telling me about, it was a 50th birthday party, and they were telling me about their memory of sport at school and that they didn't think they could play badminton because they weren't very sporty. And I said, well, that was 35 years ago. So, you know, these experiences, actually, you can all probably remember back to something that happened, positive or negative, in your childhood that's gone with you through life. And I think at best what we were seeing was sport doesn't actually make it into these formative memories for these girls. And at worst, it's actually a negative memory that they're taking with them, and that's being the inhibitor as we go through life. The fourth one really is about moments of pride, and I think these are really important both internally and externally for girls. So internally, what's making them feel good about themselves and what's fueling their self-worth? And then externally, really important when you look at socially connected, those moments of pride are being played out. How can we make sure those moments of pride are happening within sport? And what are they within sport? For these girls who are less sporty, I think we need to think really carefully about that. And then the final one is really about keeping on top of it all. And this is the time when girls are actually juggling the must-dos with the want-to-dos. And at the moment, sport is in the must-dos. But when it drops out of the must-dos, it's not making it into the want-to-dos. So it's a time when girls are really having to make those decisions. And they want to have time well spent. And at the moment, for many of these girls, taking part in sporting activity is not time well spent. So it's our responsibility really to think about reimagining, reframing sport and providing something that they're really seeking. So sport that will help them on their journey, sport to being self-assured, feel good about themselves and what they can achieve. So I think it's about reframing it so that it's something that motivates and inspires. And this is a step change, I think, from where we are. It's not just about reassuring, it's about creating something that's truly exciting. It's about redefining it so it's broader and better than anything that they've done at school. And it's about reinforcing the enjoyment of it and how it actually adds value to their lives. So the final bit really is to have a look at some of the principles that we've developed to help us really interrogate the sports and things that we're setting up for these girls. So the first one we have is really about no judgment. And I think what we have to think about here really carefully is, what's our start point? And I really strongly believe that this is not just for the sports sector. That actually, if we can open this up, if this can come from brands, if this can come from influencers, if this can come from education, if this can come from the sports sector as well, there's different ways in which that judgment is naturally not there. So we need to think about, how do we take pressure off? What language do we use with these girls? Is it about trials? Is it about A and B team? Or should we create a new language so that actually this doesn't become pressure and doesn't become something that the girls don't want to take part in? The second one is about really invoking excitement. It's not about making it a dumbed down version of what the sporty girls are doing. This is about excitement and discovery. And what we found was actually for a number of girls, they weren't looking for a sport to get involved in. They were looking to have lots of experiences, and actually variety was the driver for them. How do we bring that to these girls? Also, adventure and discovery. They're finding out new things, they're creating their own independence. How can sport actually deliver to that? The third one is about, let's be very clear about what their internal emotional reward is. What are those moments of pride within sport? And I think, again, it's not necessarily about winning and competitiveness. So let's have a think about what in that sport could be those moments of pride, and how can we help girls really recognise those moments as they go through that experience. Fourthly, and really importantly, we need to open their eyes to what's there. We were talking before about, at the moment, that narrow experience of sport just at school. They haven't even started. And, you know, we've had consultation sessions, I know, with a number of you here today, talking about all the great initiatives that are going on, but we're not getting enough girls involved in those. So again, we need to open their eyes up. We need to redefine it as more than just school at sport. The fifth one is about building into existing habits. And again, I think we need to look at what's going on in girls' lives and how we can tap into those other spheres. What can we learn from what's actually motivating girls and bring that into their sporting environment. Giving girls a voice and a choice, and this comes hand in hand with opening their eyes to what's there. We want them to feel empowered. We want them to develop the ideas. And I can give a really good example of something that one of the girls said to us. We were talking about sport tasters and saying, oh, you know, you could try all these different sports, which was interesting. And she said, oh, I like a sports party. And I thought, yeah, sport tasters, sparty, which would I like to go to? So let's have a think about how we position some of the things that we're doing. And I think the girls can really help us develop something that's really motivating for them. So giving them a choice and voice, but opening their eyes to what's there to make sure that they're not just looking at their experience of sport. Champion what's in it for them. We found it pretty much 8 out of 10 girls knew that it was great for their health to do physical activity and sport. But that's not going to motivate them. They're invincible at that age. So actually, what is it that's in there for them? And there are, again, examples that we heard from girls where they wanted to get something out of it. It might be a skill. It might just be pride at being able to do a number of different things. It might be about being together with their friends and achieving something together. And then the final one is really what this girl Can is doing, and really important. It's about the messaging that we're giving out there and expanding that image of sporty. And I think we really need to think very hard about what that looks like and creating truly relatable role models. And interestingly, for some of the girls, the relatable role models that they were talking about were their parents, were their family, but also girls who'd come into school who they hadn't even known that this girl had done martial arts, but she came in and she'd done something really extraordinary in that field. That was where they could really relate to. This was a girl like them. So again, let's have a think about those role models and how we can inspire girls. So we're back to the spectrum of engagement, and I think here it's about thinking about what we need to do to actually talk to a different subset of girls. And if you have a look across the bottom, we've talked about this more disengaged group and that we do need to get there earlier. We found within those ones that were disengaging, there were those that just needed a nudge. They really did just need a little bit of inspiration. There were some that were looking for adventure and fun and experiences. We need to provide more of that, and we need to think about how we're going to get that message out to them so that they feel included in the story. And then we need to keep doing what we're doing with the sporty girls, because that's a really important part of what we do. So when you were downstairs today, you'll have seen some of the ideas. We're not going to look at these in great detail, but I just want to talk about a couple of them. We've put together a matrix where we're looking at what are we changing in terms of attitudes and how are we changing behaviours. And then we're looking at girls from a spectrum of those who are completely disengaged through to just needing a nudge. And I think that helps us then determine what we need to do and where we need to innovate. So, for example, we had down at this end with the less engaged got really excited about something akin to a festival. So a little bit like a music festival, but for sport, where they could actually take part with teams and get involved with influencers. That was really motivating for them. So again, they started to develop some ideas around here. Here, with the fit with a purpose, there were some girls who were talking about being involved in the fire service or the police or doing some exercise that actually is part of their everyday job, and again, learning a skill. So there are a number of ideas that we're starting to think about here that could be executed. So final thoughts from me before I hand on to the panel. So first of all, I put a sort of stop. I think we have to stop talking about teenage girls as just one single group. And we need to expand the relevance of sport to meet all girls' needs. And I think we have to think about, that might look different from where it is now. The start point might not be sport, it might be from somewhere else, but let's have a think about what that could look like. I think we need to start applying some of those principles of success. Let's interrogate what we're doing and make sure that we really understand the target that we're targeting and what we want them to get from it. And I think we need to make sports opportunities really hard to exist. So we've got the old FOMO, fear of missing out. That's one of the barriers to sport, their fear of missing out with other things. We want to make sport so that they have the fear of missing out on sport and exercise as well. And then I think there's a try harder at the end, which is as a sector and outside of the sector, as I spoke of before, the brands, the companies, other people who have connections with girls. We need to collaborate to build broader, more sustainable long-term solutions. We're not great as a sector of doing long-term things. We do lots and lots of small short-term things and we don't join them up in the middle. Let's see if we can do something together that will make a bigger difference to these girls. And then I think we have then started to build some strong foundations for girls, which will take them through life. So thank you very much. I'd like to bring John to introduce the panel. And then what we're going to do is have the panel discussion and we'll have some questions at the end. So thank you very much.